10 evil serial killers that are still on the run. Serial killers, especially the Zodiac Killer, are the most legendary criminals of all time. Many have been captured, but some are still at large and probably ready to commit murder. Here is a list of 10 evil serial killers that are still on the run, despite extensive police manhunts. The Long Island Killer. This killer dismembered and dumped several victims on the shores of Long Island since 1996. 14 victims in total have been linked to this violent killer, who has since evaded capture. Most of the victims had connections to the sex trade, and police believe he may have a background in law enforcement. One of his victims included a young toddler. The Vending Machine Killer. A serial killer in Japan laced drinks in vending machine chutes with an herbicide called paraquat. This poison would cause nausea, and a few days later, the victim stopped breathing. 10 people died while 35 more survived the poisoning. The perpetrator has never been caught. Many copycat poisonings have happened in Japan ever since. The West Mesa Killer. The remains of 11 women and a fetus were discovered in the desert near Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2009. A serial killer referred to as the West Mesa Bone Collector was suspected to be the culprit. He has never been caught, although he has been connected to several other crimes. The Edgecombe County Killer. This North Carolina county witnessed the gruesome murders of 9 women and a male transvestite between 2005 and 2010. All the women were African American prostitutes. They were stabbed and then bludgeoned to death while the male victim was dismembered. The Daytona Beach Killer. The bodies of 4 women were found dumped in the open on Daytona Beach between 2005 and 2008. All the women were shot through the head. The killer has never been apprehended, and is believed to be a long-haul tracker. These killings have been linked to 24 other murders along Florida highways. The Stone Man. Over 13 people have fallen victim to this horrendous killer. In India between 1985 and 1988. This serial murderer targeted homeless people who slept on the streets. He used a large rock to crush their heads whilst they slept. He has never been caught, despite one man surviving this cruel ordeal. 12 more people were murdered again in Calcutta in 1989, using the same crushing method. No suspect has been identified ever since. The Waziong Killer. 10 women were raped and strangled with their own clothes between 1986 and 1991. This happened in South Korea, and became the most notorious murders in the country's history. The 4 victims survived, and gave a description of a slender man in his 20s. Despite recovery of a DNA sample, the killer has never been apprehended to this day. The B1 Butcher. This is Namibia's most infamous killer. He dismembered and decapitated some of his victims, then dumped the body parts separately. These crimes began in 2005, with the last victim discovered in 2007. He is still on the run despite the efforts of Namibian and South African law enforcement. The New Bedford Highway Killer. Sex workers and drug addicts were targeted by this Massachusetts killer in 1988. 11 women were murdered, and their bodies dumped by the roadside. A few suspects were identified, though no evidence was ever sufficient to convict them. Smiley Face Murders. This gets a little into conspiracy theory territory. There were a number of young men found dead in drowning deaths of many young men across the nation, ruled as accidents by most accounts. 2 retired New York City detectives believe they're connected, as evidenced by similar graffiti of a smiley face found near at least a dozen of the death scenes. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.